Hello and welcome to the Bravas Luxury Living Podcast. On every edition of the Luxury Living Podcast, we try and talk about ideas or issues all around how to improve the quality and the usability of the technology you have in your home. If this is the first time you found us or you think other people should know about this, please go and like, share, tell your friends, do whatever you can to make sure we can try and grow an audience for this podcast and encourage other people to listen to it. As ever, with me is Keith. Hey, Keith, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Nigel. How are you?
Good. Well, I think we're returning to one of our favorite subjects this week, which is home theater and technologies around home theater. And we have with us Matt Denton, Vice President of, what are you Vice President of, Matt? Just General Vice
Well,
President of I should say, from CinemaTech.
I would say sales focused, but yeah, I mean, I kind of do a lot of things around here. So,
Good.
jack
Well,
of all
listen,
trades.
well, listen, as we always do with guests, one of the first things we ask them is to tell us a bit about you and your background so we can get to know you.
Sure. So, quick history. I grew up in Houston, went to college at Oklahoma, and got a degree in construction management because I thought I wanted to build houses the rest of my life. Did that for about 2.5 years and decided that while it was a fun job, I wanted to do something a little more client facing and a little less stressful. So I found this company called CinemaTech that was right down the street from where I was living, and they focused on high-end home theater finish out. And I was like, well, that's cool because I already have, the construction background. I know how to read plans. I've been on job sites. I know how that kind of all comes together. I could visualize those things. And so I was like, man, that'd be kind of cool to do. And so that was fall of 2009. And here we are in 2021, and I'm still here. So I found a nice niche that I felt like really captured my skill set.
Okay, that's great. But why don't you tell us a bit about CinemaTech? Who are you? What do you do? And what makes you special?
Sure. So CinemaTech, it was the typical, solve a problem and create a business. So our owner, Michael Murphy, was sitting down to dinner with one of his neighbors a couple years ago, in '99, and he was building a really nice home in Dallas, Texas, and he couldn't really find any high-end home theater seating that was up to the level of the rest of his home. And so they found this company in Germany that built really high-end furniture for the European market and had been since the late 1950s. And so they went to them with the idea of home theater seating, and he brought that back, debuted it at a couple industry trade shows in 1999, and as they say, the rest is history. And then from there we went into other things, but that's really why the company began.
So I guess after what is now over a year of COVID, we're all asking about home theaters, private cinemas, whatever it is. I think probably 2 years ago you'd have heard that this segment was going to die or people didn't want to build this stuff. Have you noticed a big change in the COVID time to how important this is to people?
Definitely. So, we've always been, every year we've gotten busier and busier, but I think it's because when people want to do a room right, they find us. And what I've noticed with COVID, especially since I'd say August, September of last year, is more people want to do the room the right way. And so companies like ours are being brought into the mix more since that's all we do is, really design and create beautiful theater rooms. And I think it really happened because the first couple months of COVID, people are like, how long is this going to last? Is this really going to be changing my life? And then a couple months in, they're like, I want to watch a movie with my family and I don't have a great place to do that. Let's do that the right way. And so I think that's kind of changed the mentality around home theaters or private cinemas and will for the foreseeable future.
So when you talk about doing it the right way and the way Cinematech does it, let's kind of define the range of like I think a lot of people think of the home theater as just kind of that empty dark box with a projector and a screen in it or a big TV in it. And then you go all the way to a full theater experience with acoustic treatments and soft textures and just kind of let's describe the continuum there and what most people start with and kind of what you can do.
Yeah, so I mean, we can do really whatever the client wants. The big popular thing back in the day was these big red and gold themed theaters, and I think that kind of hurt the home theater term for a while because that's what people thought they were getting if they did a home theater. But most people these days, it's really a mixed use space, even if it's called a theater. They're doing a big sofa in the front, theater seats in the back, and then a high bar behind it, so that way they have the flexibility to use it for whatever they want. And then, from a design standpoint, they don't have to be super, crazy design. Like a lot of the clients we're working with, it's very simple and clean lines, I would say contemporary modern, because really they just want a room that has great picture, great project, great sound, great seating. And so they don't have to make it look over the top to get a great sounding room that, really performs the way they want it to.
So when you say a great sounding room, obviously you guys do the acoustics piece of it. And those acoustics are also what people are using to make the room look great design wise. So just talk a little bit more about that piece of it, the acoustic treatments and how that affects the room visually and the audio.
Sure. So both are important. A lot of times, when we're working on a project, we're working with the architect, the builder, the designer, and the client, usually a husband and wife. But, typically we see the audio video enthusiast of the family is the one that cares about the performance of the acoustics, which is really, making sure the room isn't too dead, but isn't too reflective. The best way to describe it would be you go into a room, you get handed a remote, you fire up your favorite movie, set a volume level at a level you like, and that's the last time you have to touch it. You can understand all the dialogue very clearly. The bass doesn't overwhelm you, and the volume's not, hurting your ears at some points, and then you have to turn it up to understand what's going on at others. And then to kind of tie in the other part of the question, the designer we typically see is very concerned with the look of the room. And that, when they hear, oh, there's speakers going in this room and a projector, they're trying to hide as much as they can. And the beauty with doing an acoustic treatment like ours is you get to hide all the speakers behind a fabric. So when you walk in the room, you don't see anything other than a beautiful image and maybe a projector and some nice seating. And so the designer gets what they want and the look they want, and the client gets a room that's going to perform to the level they expect.
Okay, I want to break this down a bit because I think you guys have talked about your role in helping with the acoustics. But when I think about a home theater or a private cinema, there's seats, there's video projection, a TV or a projector, there's sound. What parts of this are you focused on? Are you focused on all the technology or just making it have the right feeling and look? Where are you focused?
So if I'm explaining what our company does when I'm sitting next to someone on a plane or in an elevator, I say we do the aesthetic finish out of a home theater room. So that would be the acoustic treatments on the walls. If we want to do a fiber optic star ceiling or something on the ceiling, the theater seating or sofa seating, and then a couple other what we call theatrical elements. So like a curtain or a door treatment. But we really don't focus on the audio video. That's what a company like Bravas would provide. That being said, we do work with them to make sure everything's placed in the room correctly, to make sure the screen size is optimal for that room. A lot of clients say, "Oh, I'm good with a 120-inch screen," and then myself and like the Bravas team member would be like, "This room it should have a 150-inch diagonal screen just to get that bigger image because the resolution's so good." And no client ever complains about the screen being too big for the most part. And so it's having those kinds of conversations and working together as a team to deliver what the client wants. That's really what we specialize in.
So do we start with the customer having an empty box of a room that says, this is the room we want to use, either we're going to build it or it's already built. This is where our home theater is going to be. Is that where we start? What's the entry point for our conversation with CinemaTech?
So if you have like a room size or a shell or a framed box, that's great. Our best projects, the best rooms that turn out that we work on are the ones we get started in as early as possible. So it could be as early as the client's drawn up the plans and they say, I want a theater that seats 8 people, and then they get with us and we size the room correctly for that number of people. Other times, and I'd say most of the time, we're getting a set of plans and it's saying, here's the box or the similar shape of a box, and now what can you guys do with it? And then we look at it and tell them, okay, based on this, you can do this, this, or this. What's more important to you? Is it entertaining? Is it movie watching? Do you watch your nightly news in here? How are you going to use the space? I mean, those are questions we have to ask to get to some point of design because no two theaters are the same.
And do they answer that in terms of, let's say we're building a classic private cinema, which is, N number of seats, looking to widescreen. You can do that, in an Art Deco style or in a modern cinema. Is that the type of conversation? Do people give us a sense of the various different types of design feels that people are looking for?
Sure. So I would say the majority of what we're doing would fall in the transitional to contemporary bucket. We're working on a project right now with a Tuscan theme. We've done some that was like a Spanish villa. We've done superhero themes. We've done, we had a client that wanted to feel like they were on a cruise ship. Like in each, they had these panel monitors every like so often down the wall that had an image going across it, so it felt like you were inside, whatever structure they wanted to be in and looking outside. So there's really no wrong answer. And a lot of times, most projects we work on, the design of the theater is going to match the rest of the home. And that's why it's so important for us to be brought in early because we want to work with both the designer and the client to take that vision for the rest of the home and incorporate it correctly into the theater where it flows and doesn't seem like it's some random room in their house unless that's what they want.
So different designs, Tuscany or Old Deco. What about the ceilings? You talked a bit about star something. Talk a bit about what people are doing in the roof of their home theaters.
Yeah, so what a lot of clients like doing, and we see a lot more of these than people seem, for whatever reason, tend to think. Like they think we don't do a lot of them, and I'd say it's probably half the rooms we work on have a star ceiling. And what that means is we basically, without getting too technical, is we create a custom star ceiling to fit whatever dimensions of their space they have. We use actual fiber optics that are powered by an LED light generator, and we do different diameters. And our whole goal with our star ceiling is to create as realistic of a night sky as we can. So we always do random patterns. We'll put, sometimes 2 per square foot, and then over here we'll do 10 per square foot because we're not trying to make it really repeatable and very predictable. In addition to that, we've done different theaters where the client wanted like the Milky Way printed on the ceiling, or they wanted a cloud print to, then do some high intensity LED light on it to make it look like the Forum shops in Las Vegas where they can do the dusk till dawn kind of effect. We've also had clients do shooting stars, constellations. So the sky, no pun intended, is really the limit here. As what we can do, we've done amoeba shapes, we've done ovals. I mean, it really is. This comes back to the same conversation of, you know, client, we can do whatever you want. What do you actually want in this room? What do you want it to look like? How do you want it to function? Because one of the other really nice things about the star ceiling is it actually functions from an acoustical standpoint as well. So it's helping the room be more properly treated as well as looks really cool.
I think that's what's so cool about designing custom home theaters is you are taking the form, how beautiful it is, the acoustic treatments, the ceiling, you're taking the function, the audio, the video, the great projector, all that. And when you combine them, you're getting that really unique experience. And I think that's what a lot of people miss out when they just, go to a big box store, grab some equipment, throw it in the room, grab a couple of chairs from the cheapest place they can find and then call it a theater because it is. I mean, it is a good theater. It probably does sound pretty good and the picture's pretty good, but you miss that experience that this is a place where you really want to go. You want to spend time with family. You want to get away from everything to go there. And I think that's why so many people were rebelling against the home theater was they put it in an out of the way location. It was too small for the space and had cheap furniture and cheap electronics, and then they wondered why they didn't want to go there instead of their living room, that they spent 3 times as much on the furniture.
Right. No, and we actually see that a lot with clients where, they will see the set of plans and we'll see the theater like on the first level, right next to the kitchen or right next to, some major part of their home. And we'll say, I love how you have this right here because I know you guys are going to use it. And half the time they're like, oh, that was intentional because last time it was upstairs in a corner and we maybe went up there once a month. And we realized once we were in there, we loved watching any kind of content on there, whether it be the nightly news or, some show on HBO or a full blown movie. We just like watching it in this room. So we would just want to make it basically our TV room and their living room is more like an entertaining space and the theater's right there for them to watch anything in that they want. And then I'd
Yeah,
also say on the, oh, go ahead.
yeah, I agree with you on the placement being so important. We get a lot of feedback from clients that have older whole home audio systems that they never used them, so they don't want a new one in their house. But what you find out, it was really just really poor design. It wasn't that they didn't want the thing, it was they had such a bad experience with the way it was designed originally that now they think they don't want it because they don't think they're getting the benefits. They think they're just getting the drawbacks.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing is true about leather. I've had so many clients come in and go, "Oh, we don't want leather," and they're like, "What do most clients buy?" And I'm like, "Most clients buy leather, but we use real, actual leather that's dyed all the way through, comes from either Sweden or Northern Europe. It's, the cowls are grass fed, it's real actual leather. It's not like what they're going to find at some big, furniture store. Because they'll always complain like, oh, I sat in the seats, and especially with us being here in Texas for clients here, they'll be like, I sat in there for 10 minutes, and all of a sudden, the leather was all sticky and gross and everything, and I'm like, well, you didn't have real leather, and that's why you didn't like it. So, I mean, that's those little details are what makes a difference from a room that they call a theater and will actually, just maybe use once a month versus a room they're gonna want to show off to their friends, want to be in all the time, and like that's their true, anything watching space.
So I guess that brings a question to me. I know lots of people are discussing, is this seats or recliners or both or either? What are people putting in their home theaters today?
It's usually a mixture of both. Most of the clients decide to do like what we call traditional theater seating, which means kind of like the chair I'm sitting in now with the higher back. It inclines out, so it slides forward, so it still motorizes and everything. But what a lot of clients are doing is in the front row, they're doing some kind of sofa style seat that usually has chase lounges, which are these things you can lay down on the end. And then the middle, they either do more of those or they'll do seats that can be motorized or stationary and then have an ottoman in front of them. And what that does is it allows you to have a space that has different seating offerings depending on what the clients want. Sometimes if you're sitting there watching the Masters, you may just want to lay down on a chase and not really, get fully into the, what you're watching. Other times, when it's movie night, you want to be in a truly dedicated, like, give me the popcorn, let's sit in this chair and watch a movie. And then we see a lot of clients do, the high bar, like I mentioned earlier, which is typically behind the row of seats that like I'm sitting in, and that's going to be for it's going to be typically 42 inches high. It's going to be a place they can sit out food and drinks, or maybe it's if this is the theater's off like a game room or some other entertaining space, people are going to come in there, watch a football game for 10 minutes, sit down, have a beer or something, and then they're going to leave. And so they need that flexible seating that's not going to be as regimented, like let me sit in this, motorize it out, and I'm not going to move for 2 hours.
And are they putting different levels in a raised seats a thing still, or is they all the seats at the same level?
So if we had a choice, each row of seats is going to be its own level, and then you would build the structure down. So typically in most theaters, it's going to be anywhere from 12 to 18 inches of a drop between each row. And that's really so you can properly see the screen from each location. I know sometimes you can find chairs that are built with a built-in riser, but the problem with those is the seat pan that you're actually sitting in now is sitting 6 inches off the ground, so you feel like you're kind of a kid in a bar stool or something, and it feels a little weird. So that kind of comes back to the proper design of rooms is if you get, someone like us involved early, we can make sure that the room is laid out correctly so that you do have proper sight lines and you have enough height in each row to be able to sit comfortably, as
Now,
well as space between the rows.
can you make my seats vibrate like these new theaters where the red box seats or whatever they are that can shake, rattle, and hum as well?
Yeah, so I think you're referencing the DBox system, and it's
Oh,
what they use at like theme parks and stuff, where the chair will actually move along with the movie. We've been working with them for probably 15, 20 years now, and it is something we can do on most of our seats. To a lesser extent, sometimes people want to put in like what they call a butt shaker or butt kicker or something, and you can attach those to our chairs. But me personally, I'd rather just put better subwoofers in the room and have it feel throughout the entire space versus just your chair kind of shaking from time to time. I will say the
Totally
DBox
agree.
thing is really cool for video games, though.
Yeah, DBox is fun, but I agree. More subs is always better. So we've talked about kind of the different chairs and different styles of seating for different uses. I guess one of the other big things is the way you light the spaces. I know that's one thing we love about CinemaTech theaters is that you have a lot of options for lighting. And I think, again, cheap home theaters, one of the issues is they're always underlit, not low lit. There's just either not enough lighting or it's placed poorly. Talk about some of the options you have for that.
So to me, one of the most common things we bring up when we're designing a theater is, the client will be like, I don't want any can lights in this room. I just want either sconces or wall lights or something. And we always say, that's great, but when it comes time for someone to clean this room, how are they going to see everything in it? So those are like the little details where you don't need can lights from a functional standpoint, maybe, but or from a like, when you're going in there and watching a movie, but it's great to have things like that so that when someone does want to light up the room and really clean it, you can. Other lighting elements that we see that are very common is this LED track light that usually comes in a channel that's about 1.25 inches thick, which is the same thickness as our acoustic treatment. And a lot of the rooms we're designing now with space issues, like if someone's trying to fit that extra chair in, our acoustics are only 1.25 inches deep, and we're able to get that and the channel on the same plane, so you can have a really cool, like futuristic kind of contemporary modern room without taking up much depth of it. And then the really cool thing about all that lighting is most of it comes available in what they call RGB, which basically means you can make it whatever color you want. And that's really cool because if you're, like here in Dallas, if you're watching a Stars game, you could have it light up green while you're watching that, and then it's Oscar night, you could have it go to like a gold color. So the LED lighting factor is very cool, and we're seeing a lot of clients use it. Even if they don't use it on the walls, they're still putting it in the ceiling and their cove surrounding their star ceiling, which helps illuminate the room as well.
Yeah, I think the other thing that a lot of people miss is when you think about a home theater as being just that one-dimensional space where all you're using it for is to watch a movie in the dark. Yeah, you don't need much light, but I know in our house we have a small theater, and when I bought it, it only had a pair of sconce lights, and we added lighting behind the screen and can lighting in the ceiling because if my wife wants to be in the room with me, but not watching what I'm watching, if I'm just watching a soccer game or F1 or something like that, well, she wants to be able to read or do something else. And if the room is only good when it's black, then it is just this single use space. And you kind of go back to like, we essentially designed spaces in the past that weren't good for the family, that weren't designed to be used a lot. And now that we're thinking about them a little more thoughtfully, both with what you're doing and the way we're designing the technology and how easy it is to use, it finally is this space that you can use throughout the day, throughout the year, and actually find multiple uses for it. And I just think that's so interesting. Like we've added so much value back to the space.
Well, and I think that comes back to the questions we ask, when we start our design processes. How are you going to use the space? How many people do you want to seat? What are you going to watch on the screen? Because those kinds of questions are more important than the look of the room. Because the look of the room, we can create whatever you want, but before we can get there, we have to know how the space will actually be used. Because you can make a room that looks great, but like you said, if it doesn't function for 90% of the way you're going to use it, then you're never going to use it. So figuring out how it's going to be used is the most important question to ask at the very beginning.
Now, one of the things I know is difficult for people is they can tell you what they want, but being able to visualize what that looks like in real life is actually a lot harder. Some people don't have the visual identity. So you guys will produce 3D renderings and stuff like that to help them?
That's correct. So we have what's called our design service program. And what that is, for a nominal $4,000 design fee, we'll get with you guys, the client, the designer, the builder, the architect, ask all those questions that are very important to figure out how the room's going to be used. We'll then draw it up in 2D and AutoCAD, place speakers, make sure the screen's the right size, make sure the projector can get to it correctly, that the flow works for the client. And then we work with the designer and the client to pick materials and finishes. And then we create 3D renderings of the room so the client can really see what the room's going to look like. And that's the point where everyone's like, oh, wow, I get it. And then, if they decide to move forward with us, great. And then we credit them for that design feedback because, they've taken they decided to move forward with us. So we want to give that back to them. And I will say the most common thing changed when we do a rendering is the carpet. Because people pick these carpets that they love this pattern and they think it's going to look so cool. And then they see it everywhere in the room and they're like, whoa, that's too busy. So we need to dial it back a bit. But it's a great insurance policy if I'm a client because, I've done things at my house or just things in life. And whenever someone tries to explain it to me conceptually, I get a good understanding of it, but I still am just kind of going on a hope and a wish that, hey, this is going to come out the way they said it would. When we do the rendering, I show them the rendering. We have a great example. It's like, here's a rendering of our demo theater here in Dallas, and here's what it actually came out to. And they're very close. And that kind of assurance is very comforting to a client because at the end of the day, they just want a room that looks the way they want it to look and functions the way they want it to function. They don't care. Some clients may care, but most clients, they don't care what model speaker they have. They just want to make sure it sounds great. They don't care what projector they have. They don't care what screen, seats. None of the product part of it matters as long as the room functions the way they want it to.
And when you've done that design, you'll build all of the wall coverings and doors and ceilings and ship that, and then someone like Bravas installs it. Is that how that works, or do you come and install it yourselves?
We actually have certified installers that travel the country, and so they just basically go project to project doing that install. We do ship it ahead of time to the job, but the nice thing about our acoustic treatment is everything is it's modular to start as far as like all of our panels come in a 2 foot by 4 foot dimension. And then we basically get on site, we run our track system, which is what's used to tuck the fabric into. And without getting too technical, that's screwed in. Then we install our absorbative, diffusive, or reflective panels, and we cut them to fit inside that track area. And then once we're done, we'll then stretch the fabric into that track to cover it and have a beautiful finish. One other thing that our team does is we also shim out the track when we're installing it, just like a millwork company would for their columns or baseboards. So even if the wall's not perfectly straight, once we're done, it will look perfectly straight with us shimming everything out. Same with the star ceiling. We need to know the dimension of that space, but we always build our ceilings about 3 inches less in width and depth than the overall will be. Because when we get there, we actually run a fresh piece of track around the perimeter, so we can do the same thing of shimming it out and making sure we cover every square inch of that ceiling. So it's not like a pre-made panel you try to stick up in the ceiling and then it, doesn't fit. And now we got to ship it back and redo it. Like, no, we want to show up and everything we do is custom field cut on site.
Yeah, I think that $4,000 design fee is such a bargain because even if somebody didn't end up working with CinemaTech to do their acoustic treatments or their chairs, like at least they've answered all of those questions. They've solved the problems. They've done the math. They've kind of figured out whether or not this is going to work. And then honestly, there's no point not working with CinemaTech at that point, but you just solve so many problems. And as you mentioned, like you have to work with the architect on getting the space right from the beginning. You have to work with the contractor and their trim people to make sure that everything's ready for those panels to go in, and just doing all of that work up front to make sure you get that completely integrated perfect solution is I think it probably sounds expensive at first, just $4,000 just for the design, but it's a bargain. It really is.
No, and we've been charging that same amount now. I want to say it's like 5 or 6 years we haven't changed our price, and we've thought about it at times because we have a 5-person design staff that, between the drawings and the renderings, I mean, that's a lot of people, for to do that kind of level of work at the level we do for that amount. But we've learned that, we want to make sure a client's comfortable with us. We kind of think of it as an interview process. We'll happily have a call with a client before they even sign up for that, to make sure that they understand what they're getting into with us and they understand how we work. But even once they pay us that, we're still being interviewed to actually do their room. And so it allows them proper time to vet us, to go, have multiple calls with our team, possibly meet at one of our showrooms, maybe we do a field visit, come to the job site. We're working with their team, so the client gets to see how we interact with their builder and their architect and their designer. And so that way, when we get to the point of here's your final room design and here's how much it's going to cost, they either love us and trust us and want to move forward, or we didn't do a good enough job winning their confidence. And if someone doesn't move forward, which is incredibly rare, usually it's because the house doesn't get built or some reason outside of anyone's control. But if for whatever reason they didn't want to move forward, it's because we didn't do a good job building their trust.
So the $4,000 strikes me has to put in context of what sort of entry price of a CinemaTech home theater is. And I know the sky is not the limit here, but how much typically are people spending on, a good quality CinemaTech designed home theater?
So I would say it depends on the design of the room. So when I say that, if you have a very simplistic design, we're only having to run a minimal amount of track in that room and tuck one piece of fabric, call it per what we call bay, which is like, say, a section from the floor to the ceiling. So it's a very simplistic room. It can be less. And that same size room, if you went the very traditional red and gold with a lot of molding and a lot of cutting of track and everything, that room could end up costing, 1.5 times as much as the other way of doing it. But that being said, most of the rooms we work on are going to be somewhere in the $50,000 to $100,000 range for the acoustic treatments. But that's not just the materials, that's also us designing where everything goes, that's shipping everything to the job site, that's us having our installer come in and do the install. Our average install is 2.5 weeks with one guy working 10 hours a day and weekends. So it's, when we tell someone that, they're like, oh, you're just putting fabric and track on the wall. And it's like, we are, but there's way more to it than that. And and our lead installer has been with us 25 years. He even worked with one of our guys before CinemaTech started. And then, all of our average tenure of installer is 10 plus years. And so these guys are pros at what they do. And you get a certain level of fit and finish, as you do with anything in your home, working with people that may cost a little more, but no one regrets quality once it's done.
Yeah, you get what you pay for in this world, and if that sounds like a lot of money to you, then you don't want a real home theater. And if you can afford it and you've got the space for it, there's really no better way to do it, I don't think.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. So that's for the acoustic treatment, and then for the theater seating or sofa seating, most of the options we offer are going to range in the 3,000 to 8,000 per seat range. We've done some seats that had, we had a client that wanted to do a superhero theme in each chair, and so they ended up using like 3 or 4 different leathers on each seat, and those were highly, highly custom chairs, and those ended up being about 10,000 a seat, but within reason, most everything we do is that 3 to 8K range, and that's going to be seating either manufactured in Germany, where we started the business back, like I mentioned earlier, in 1999, and then we have a U.S. factory as well when clients don't have the time to be able to wait the 3 to 4 months for German seating. So we have a U.S. factory that we can turn around seats in 2 months in, and we can do a lot more customization as well if someone wants something very specific.
So, Keith, which superhero chair would you like?
I think I'll go classic. I'll go Captain America.
What
Just
about
go
you,
ahead and
Matt?
get one of those made.
Which would you go for?
Based on the final product, I honestly thought the Hulk was the coolest chair because they had
Green.
the backrest was all green, the seat area was purple, and then the footrest was green. It was really cool.
Personally, I'm going for Doctor Strange. There doesn't seem to be a good alternative to that. Listen, we love home theaters. We think the experience is really unparalleled when done well and adds a huge amount to your enjoyment and to the home. But we do like to, as we draw our podcast to an end, play our 3-question game. And the second question of which you probably will have a good answer to. But the first question first, and we ask in our 3 questions of every guest. First question, what piece of home technology could you not live without? Is there a piece of technology you're using in your home you think makes your home work better?
Yeah, I thought about this and I was like, what do I use every day in my house? And it was the being able to control music from my phone in any room of the home. That to me has been the coolest thing ever. Quick little side story: when I was in college, I worked at a retail store, and they had a touch screen on the wall that you could go over and pick your music, like your band, and then whatever songs they had approved to play in that store. And you could go in and touch the screen and pick the song, and then it would play in the queue it went into. And I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world. And then I was like, that if I get down the road when I have a house, I got to have something like this. And then the technology got way better than that, where you could just, if you have a phone, you're good to go. But I would say that's the one thing I cannot live without.
Okay, and then think about your work life. What is the best job, or the most interesting, or the most outrageous? It may be the superheroes, but what's the most interesting or outrageous job you guys have done that you can think of?
There's 2 that come to mind. There was one we did in LA a few years ago. It was my favorite job site I've ever been on, and favorite home I've ever been to. You pulled up, it was in the Hollywood Hills, of course, and you pull up to this job site, and it has this like a car landing area that you would park your car. And then you'd walk about 50 feet across this catwalk and enter the house at like the 3rd level of the 7-story structure. That was like this old, it was a really cool, unique mid-century modern house that was, and it was just very unique. And then the views, you could see the Pacific Ocean, the LA skyline, the valley. So it was 360-degree views of Southern California. And it was just the coolest project I've ever been to. But as far as like theater room, we did one in Steamboat Springs a handful of years ago where it was a client out of here in Dallas. And he was like, I have this house there. I want to build this theater. And we're like, oh, cool. What size do you think? And he goes, well, I got this space that I can connect my house to. It's like a 40 by 30 by 20-foot area that we're just going to dig out and build a theater. And we're like, oh, okay. So that's a good size room. And it ended up being like a 32-seat theater, 20-foot wide screen. I mean, this massive, massive room. I think it ended up being like about a $2 million room when it was all said and done. But it had like 50 speakers in it and a rear projection with this glass screen. And it was very unique and very cool. And the client could not have been nicer. And we ended up redoing his theater here in Dallas too, 2 years ago. But he was just the coolest client and a really, really neat project.
It's always a good project when you talk about the screen in feet, not inches.
Right.
Yeah, and that
And that
sounds
was
like a
width.
home
That was
cinemaplex.
width.
That's a home
Yeah.
cinemaplex, not a home theater. That's big enough for 2 screens.
Yeah, it was huge.
All right, and final question from us is there a piece of technology that you would like to be invented that you can think of that has yet to be delivered that would make your life better?
Hmm. I would say this might already exist, but I have yet to find it. So if you know it exists, please tell me because it drives me crazy. It used to be you had a cable box, and if you wanted to find something, you just hit search, and it would look at HBO, Showtime, TBS, whatever channels. Well, now with all these streaming services, every channel, there's certain content on certain platforms, and I would love there to just be one app I can download on my TV or my Roku or whatever that I could go into and go search for parts unknown. And it says, okay, seasons 7 through 13, HBO Max, seasons 1 through 3, Netflix, or whatever it is, and I can click on it and watch it. That would be amazing. So I
I
don't
have
know if
great
that
news
exists,
for you.
but that exists.
Apple TV.
It
Yeah,
does that?
yeah, on the Apple TV app, talk about difficult naming. The Apple Plus on Apple TV will search some of the services that you have subscribed to. But I absolutely get that because I don't think it does all of them. It's the only ones they've got a relationship with, and if you've cut the cord, it can be difficult to find what you want sometimes.
Well, and
Yeah.
there's like a new
It
one
is.
every day. There's that Peacock, the Paramount. Now there's that Disney or Discovery Plus or whatever. I mean, there's too many. So
Well, and if you have an HBO Max with all those films being released, I'm guessing a CinemaTech cinema home theater would be the perfect place to watch it.
it would be.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end. Saying thank you for joining us. Thanks very much.
Thank you guys. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for your time, Matt.